What's going on, knuckleheads? It's George with Fighters Rep, and if you like to talk about combat sports, click the subscribe button below and join Knucklehead Nation. We do this every week, and this right here is our Keith Thurman versus Manny Pacquiao, or Manny Pacquiao versus Keith Thurman Preview Prediction, and this is an absolute barn burner of a weekend if you're into combat sports. If you like to talk about combat sports, especially striking sports, you've reached the right place. So Manny Pacquiao versus Keith Thurman. What are our thoughts on this fight? Well, I'm going to start out by going through the tail of the tape. Then we're going to discuss who we think is going to win the fight. Then I'm going to turn it back over to you guys, but not before we talk about some other fantastic fights we've got going on this weekend, knuckleheads. So definitely stay tuned for that. We'll be making predictions on all of them. So first and foremost, I think definitely the biggest fight of the weekend is Manny Pacquiao, versus Keith Thurman for the WBA welterweight title at the MGM Grand in beautiful Las Vegas. Was just there last weekend. It's Keith Thurman with his super world title from the WBA, 29-0 with 22 knockouts, going up against the legend Manny Pacquiao, who holds the WBA's world title as opposed to the super world title, which is the one Keith Thurman holds. Kind of strange, a weird intra alphabet soup sort of unification bout, but nonetheless, Manny Pacquiao, 61 wins, 7 losses, 2 draws, 39 knockouts. My goodness, he sounds like one of those old-timey boxers with a record like that. And this is a really, really important fight in that it could really be a crossroads fight for both guys. Depending on the outcome of this fight, it could have a huge impact on both guys' careers. So let's kind of get into the physical attributes of both guys. First and foremost, the advantage physically seems to lie with Keith Thurman. He's 30 years old versus Manny Pacquiao, who's 40 years old, which is typically really old in the boxing game. Also, Manny Pacquiao is a full 2 inches shorter than Keith Thurman, and if you don't think height is an advantage, then he's also got 2 inches in reach. Now, I put air quotes around reach because, again, they're measuring wingspan, and that might not be accurate, but Keith Thurman does have a 2-inch wingspan advantage at 69 inches versus Manny Pacquiao's still respectable 67 inches. Will that be enough, though, for Keith Thurman to sort of win this fight? I think it's up for debate. Now, Keith Thurman definitely, I believe, has age at his advantage, but Manny Pacquiao looked so good in his last fight against Adrian Broner that I really couldn't put it past him to still be very, very athletic and competitive even at the age of 40. And Keith Thurman at the age of 30 should be starting to enter his prime or priming as we speak. But because of an elbow surgery that sort of kept him on the shelf for almost 2 years between 2017 and 2019, Keith Thurman may not be at the form he needs to be in order to win this fight. Now, the keys to victory for each guy, I think, are pretty simple. I think Manny Pacquiao needs to use his speed, and he needs to use his movement, and he needs to basically score a lot of points and throw a lot of volume at Keith Thurman, who's probably going to be more cerebral in a boxing match. Keith Thurman is very cerebral. He's a little bit awkward. He kind of picks his shots. Manny Pacquiao's a volume guy, but Manny is going to have to be careful when he goes in there and throws all that volume, because Keith is known as one time, even though he hasn't really stopped anybody, I think, since Luis Collazo, and the one-time moniker has kind of gone by the wayside as he's increased the competition. And there's no doubt that Keith Thurman is really taking a step up, especially after his last fight against Josesito Lopez in going up against the legend in Manny Pacquiao. Now, a couple interesting things about this fight. Thurman opened up as the favorite, the odds favorite, at around a minus 150, and they had Pacquiao as the underdog, the plus 120 underdog. But that somehow changed since the fight was announced, and now Pacquiao is a favorite. And it's looking like he's a favorite in between 130, minus 137, minus 175. And they've got Keith Thurman as the underdog between 110 and plus 142. But, you know, it really is a toss-up, this fight. It's going to be a very close fight. And there's no real easy pick here. Now, I'm going to give you guys some reasons as to why I think who I think is going to win. And I'm just going to go ahead and say it. My prediction for this fight, and it's mainly because of momentum. I've got to go with a points decision for Manny Pacquiao. Now, typically, I wouldn't say that if things were sort of more normal than they were. But unfortunately for Keith Thurman, he hurt his elbow a couple years back in 2017, and he kind of was on the shelf for 2 years. And when he came back, he wasn't the same guy. He wasn't the guy that beat Sean Porter. He wasn't the guy that beat Danny Garcia. And mind you, those were 2 wars, and those were 2 very close fights. But Keith Thurman, in my opinion, definitely won those fights. And I'm a big fan of one-time Keith Thurman. He's a Florida boy. I'm a Florida boy. I love his style of fighting. He's aggressive. He's not afraid to lose. And I think he's the kind of guy that boxing needs. But that 2-year hiatus, right, I feel like it really, really killed his momentum. He also got married and had a lot of lifestyle changes during that period. Moreover, when he came back against Josesito Lopez, man, if you guys watched that fight, he fought a life and death fight against Josesito Lopez, where I believe it was in the 7th round. He got caught with a left hook from a Josesito Lopez that's not known for his punching power, and nearly got finished. I mean, he was on the verge of getting finished in that fight. So that his inactivity since, I believe since mid-2017, Keith Thurman has only fought once. Since mid-2017, I believe he's only fought Josesito Lopez. And then you've got Manny Pacquiao, who's been, even though he's 40 years old and much older and is a senator in the Philippines, has got all kinds of stuff going on, he's been much more active. And he's coming off a very dominant win against a much younger Adrian Broner. And Adrian Broner is another one of these guys that just doesn't throw enough volume. He sort of picks his shots. Now, I'm not saying that Adrian Broner and Keith Thurman are the same guy. I think Keith Thurman is better than Adrian Broner. I think he hits harder. I think he's got a higher boxing IQ. But they're comparable enough in that Keith Thurman doesn't have high volume typically. He's going to look for his shot. He's one time. He's going to look for that big counter punch. Could he land it against Manny Pacquiao? Yes, we've seen that. We've seen Juan Manuel Dinamita Marquez absolutely detonate on Manny Pacquiao and knock him out. But that was a while back. Pacquiao's a lot more patient. I think he's wiser. And I just got to give the points edge because of the momentum, because of being more active, to Manny Pacquiao, because of the volume. Just, you know, everything for me in this fight seems to be favoring Manny Pacquiao. And even the power, I mean, I would be worried about Keith Thurman's power in this fight. But the thing is, since Keith Thurman stepped up his competition, since he started fighting guys like Sean Porter and Danny Garcia, the elite of the division, he's basically not been able to finish anybody off. You know, he was one Jesus Soto Caras Luis Colazzo and guys like that. But even a end of his career, Robert Guerrero was a guy that Keith Thurman just couldn't stop. And of course, Robert Guerrero is a durable guy, but it's just he just couldn't stop him. So because of those reasons, the momentum, the lifestyle changes, the volume versus the one punch, the looking for that one counter punch. I think the safe bet is a slight advantage to Manny Pacquiao, despite him being 40 years of age. Keith Thurman has never fought a guy as fast as Manny Pacquiao. Keith Thurman might have not even fought too many guys that hit as hard as Manny Pacquiao. I think he carries his power well, even into welterweight. I think Danny Garcia is probably, and yeah, Danny Garcia is probably the hardest puncher. But he basically throws a single punch at a time. Pacquiao darts in, darts out, throws combinations. So I actually like Manny Pacquiao in this fight. My heart is telling me Keith Thurman, but my mind is telling me Manny Pacquiao might be too much for him at this juncture. I would have liked to see Keith Thurman maybe take another fight after that Josecito Lopez debacle and the 2-year layoff before fighting a guy like Manny Pacquiao, despite the fact that he's 40 years old. But nonetheless, just looking at things the way they are, I got to go with Manny Pacquiao. Now, another interesting pair of fights are going down this weekend in boxing. Actually, there are a few fights that I'm really interested in, and I'm just going to rattle them off for you guys real quick. We've got Caleb Plant going against Mike Lee for Caleb Plant's IBF super middleweight title. That's going to be a fantastic fight. And on the same card, we've got Efe Ajagba, a really, really classy heavyweight that I'm really looking forward to, going against a guy named Ali Aren Demirizan. I'm not sure if I said that right, but Efe Ajagba is a massive prospect in the heavyweight division. He's an absolute beast and somebody I want to watch. And the Caleb Plant versus Mike Lee fight, there's a lot at stake. The super middleweight title. I think that's a really exciting fight. There's a lot of animosity between the two guys. I watched the weigh-in today, and they really want to kill each other. But the fights I'm actually looking forward to the most, as ridiculous as this may sound, is the fights that are happening on the Zone in London. And the reason I'm looking forward to those fights so much is because I just feel like the English do such a fantastic job of sort of getting you emotionally invested. The guys out in the UK, they do such a fantastic job of getting you emotionally invested into these fighters, building their characters. It's something I've always wanted to emulate with Fighters Rep, and I'm continuing to do, which, by the way, you could tune in July 27th and watch Fighters Rep live right here on YouTube if you don't buy tickets. But yeah, basically, Dillion White is fighting Oscar Rivas for the vacant WBC interim heavyweight title is what it's looking like. And on that same card, Derek Chisora is fighting Artur Szpilka, which is a pretty cool fight. But Dave Allen is fighting David Price, and that is an exceptionally exciting fight if you're a hardcore boxing fan. Those are two guys that are basically domestic level in the UK. They're trying to break through into world level. And the winner of that fight is probably going to fight Povetkin. And then at that point, may be eligible for a title. And I'm really excited because Dave Allen looked great in his last fight, knocking out Lewis Brown. David Price has kind of been, up and down, more down. He's the one that had all the potential a few years back that everybody was talking about, but then he got knocked out by Tony Thompson a couple times, and his career kind of, started to head down. But, Dave Allen has kind of picked things up. He went from being this cult kind of followed guy, under the radar, people just wanted to see him fight, almost like a guy people felt bad for. But now he's really turned a corner, and he's got I believe it's Darren Barker training him, former middleweight champion, and he's really stepped his game up. So that's going to be an exciting fight. But that Dillian Whyte, Oscar Rivas fight, if you guys don't tune in for that, you guys are tripping. Dillian Whyte, in my opinion, is one of the most dangerous heavyweights in the game right now. And so is Oscar Rivas. He's been very much avoided. But I think Dillian Whyte is just too consummate of a professional boxer. He's too good on the professional level to lose to a guy like Oscar Rivas, who seems to be the more decorated amateur. But, I really think the pro game is different. Dillian Whyte has learned on the job as a pro, and he's an absolute beast. The last time he lost was to Anthony Joshua, but he rocked Anthony Joshua. But since then, he's knocked out Lucas Brown. He's knocked out. Actually, he went to a decision and beat Joseph Parker, who was a former titleist as well. And he's just, he's been fighting anybody in his path. I mean, this is one of those guys that deserves all the respect. He's been calling out Wilder. He's been calling out Joshua again. This guy, he's been calling out Fury. This guy's down to fight anybody. And he's become one of my favorite fighters, and that's Dillian Whyte. So I definitely would tune into that fight. I do think Oscar Rivas is a decorated amateur. He's got, great skills, but I think Dillian Whyte on the pro level is just too much for him. I think Dillian Whyte, if he keeps doing what he's doing, is eventually going to break in to the title picture in the heavyweight division. He might be a guy that can, that can give those guys like Wilder and Fury and these guys a run for their money. I actually think Dillian Whyte's style would be a really tough style for a guy like Wilder to deal with. I think a guy like Fury would deal with him a lot more handily. And I think also a fight against Ruiz would be a really good fight. We've seen Dillian Whyte against Joshua, but he wasn't even where he's at now. I mean, Dillian Whyte has improved leaps and bounds. So that's my prediction on that one. As far as the Mike Lee and Caleb Plant fight goes, I think Plant is he's just too good. He's fought better competition. So I think Caleb Plant takes the fight against Mike Lee. That's pretty much it, guys. So, I'm going to turn it over to you guys. See what you guys are saying in the chat here. We've got unemployed Mario Yamasaki in the chat as usual, saying, "What's up, champ? What's going on? I'm doing good. How are you, champ? I appreciate you always joining the chat." And again, you guys could always donate below or buy a Fighters Rep shirt. Anything you donate or purchase is invested for the most part. Most of the money is invested right back in to Fighters Rep Promotions and building the best kickboxing brand in the world, as well as this channel. Marco Martinez, what's up, my brother? He's saying Keith Thurman was one of my favorite boxers, but man, has he been inactive. He fights so infrequently. And that's part of the reason I got to go against him in this fight. You cannot be that inactive in the fight game. 2 years off, elbow surgery, coming back against Josecito Lopez and going life and death after you clearly beat Danny Garcia and Sean Porter is a huge kind of deterioration. And to step in there against a legend like Manny Pacquiao, who's got almost, over 70 fights, it may be a mistake. Kamar Lewis, thank you so much for joining the chat, brother. I greatly appreciate you. Kamar says, I think it'll be a good fight, but Manny will outwork Keith. Pacquiao throws maybe 1,000 punches per fight. Keith doesn't have the footwork to make him miss like Floyd Mayweather or Terrence Crawford. I agree with that. I think Terrence Crawford is a bit too far-fetched for anybody in these divisions at this time other than Errol Spence. Terrence Crawford is an absolute problem, and Mayweather is an absolute genius as far as defense goes. So those kind of guys would be able to deal with Pacquiao. I think a prime Pacquiao maybe against Crawford would be competitive. But anyway, at this point, Terrence Crawford is way too much for either of these guys, in my opinion. But Pacquiao does throw a lot of punches. Thurman doesn't have the footwork to make him miss. He's not going to be fast enough, and he gets hurt to the body. If Pacquiao can go to the body against Thurman, this could be an early night. Pacquiao does hit hard. As far as Keith, though, I love Keith. I think he's a great fighter. I love the fact that, he tries to get you out of there and he's not scared to lose. So honestly, if I had to pick, I want Keith Thurman to win because he's 30 years old. He's got his whole life ahead of him. He's an extremely exciting fighter. He brings a culture that boxing needs where he's willing to fight. He has an O, like he says, and he's not afraid to let it go. So I got a lot of love for Keith Thurman. Pacquiao's already in the twilight of his career. He's already done enough. I would almost be sad for Keith Thurman. I would be gutted for Keith Thurman if he were to lose this fight. But it's just something about this fight. I mean, a lot of things about this fight make me feel like it's a poor choice for Keith Thurman. Kamar Lewis just donated to Fighters Rep and wrote, "Keep up the good work, brother. Bless up to you, my brother Kamar. Much appreciated." Like I tell everybody, the great majority of anything that's ever donated or purchased here is going to go right back into Fighters Rep. It's going to be live and free right here on YouTube, July 27th. I've got some of the best camps in the world, from Black House to CMMA to you name them, out here in California. We got the best fighters in the world, and I'm working hard building the best young talent in the world. Soon we'll be doing pro-am shows, and it's growing. It's getting great. So, I greatly appreciate your contribution to that, and you have contributed to that, and you do a lot for these young fighters when you do that. So thank you so much. Marco Martinez wrote, "Manny isn't the same anymore. If it was a younger Thurman, I think he would have won easy, but I have no idea how good he is anymore." And that's obviously another factor, Marco. That's a huge factor. Manny Pacquiao is 40 years old. He's a senator. He's got no real incentive other than, wanting to compete for the love of the sport, to be in there. He's got so many things that have come from boxing that have blessed his life from boxing. And, he doesn't need to do this anymore. But, has Keith Thurman also lost that hunger, or was it just rust in that Josecito Lopez? Something tells me for sure there was rust involved in that Josecito Lopez fight. But the hunger thing could be a factor too, because when you're sitting on the shelf for 2 years, you've already made some money. You go and you get married, you travel the world, you see new things. Keith Thurman is a guy that thinks. He's a thinker. He reads books. He's kind of a nerd, and so, and I mean that in a good way. And so you never know. Perhaps the guy has decided to take some other route in life. And he's just doing the boxing thing to make money. I think we're going to find out on Saturday a lot. It's gonna be a lot. Then we have Marco Martinez saying, "Does Pac-Man still throw that much?" And Kamar Lewis, thank you so much again, Kamar, saying Marco Martinez between 700 and 1,000 punches per fight. And yeah, man, the guy is like, the guy's like the needle on a sewing machine. He just keeps going, and he's nonstop, and he's darting in and out, and his footwork, and you've seen his calves. They're like superhuman mutant calves, and the guy just doesn't get tired. He goes in and out. So it's going to be a tough fight for Keith Thurman. Marco, you wrote, "I like the fight, but I don't think it's pay-per-view worthy. Doubt it does 200,000 buys." Well, Marco, you may be right about that, but you may be really wrong about that, because Manny Pacquiao has the entire Philippines behind him, as well as a ton of other fans he's picked up along the way of a career spanning over 20 years. And then Keith Thurman is one of the most exciting fighters in the division, in boxing too, when he's in his prime. I just hope we can get that Keith Thurman back. I really hope we can get him back. I'm not exactly sure what channel the fight is going to be on, but I would imagine that if it's on, or if it's in Vegas, okay, it looks like it's on Fox pay-per-view. It's looking like it's on pay-per-view. So I think that's your answer right there, brother. It's going to be on pay-per-view. And, maybe you don't think it's pay-per-view worthy, but a lot of people will. A lot of people will tune in to watch Manny Pacquiao versus Keith Thurman. It's going to be, I think it's a very intriguing fight. Like I said, we don't know where these guys are at. We know more about Pacquiao at this point than we know about Thurman. So then Marco Martinez wrote, what's Errol Spence up to? When does he fight? I think they really missed the boat not making the Pacquiao fight with Spence. Loses momentum after his win over Garcia. I think Errol Spence does need to get in there. I think he wanted the Pacquiao fight, but excuse me, if you're Manny Pacquiao's manager or agent, you don't go anywhere near Errol Spence. Errol Spence is a young, vicious, hungry man. And, you're not going to want to deal with Errol Spence if you're Manny Pacquiao at 40 years old. Errol Spence is a middleweight cutting down to welterweight. The guy's huge. He's sparring with the Charlo brothers. And Pacquiao doesn't have any business in the ring with a guy as big as Errol Spence. I think he'd get crushed at this point. But yeah, Errol Spence does need to line up a big fight. I think the fight for Errol Spence, well, right now I think he's going to further unify the belts. And then after that, he'll probably get a fight with Terrence Crawford, which I think is probably the most interesting fight in boxing at this point, or one of them, is to try to get Terrence Crawford in there against Errol Spence. I think that would be a fantastic fight. That'd be another Hagler Hearns, something like that. I mean, those guys are two absolute beasts, and I'd love to watch them fight. Kamar Lewis is saying, White is my fellow Jamaican countryman, but Wilder's a bad matchup for him. He gets hit too often. First off, I got a lot of love for the Jamaicans. I'm from Miami, and I grew up with a lot of Jamaicans. Man, what fantastic, cultured, lovely people they are, and I love the food. I used to hit up this Jamaican restaurant in Miami all the time, get me some curried goat and stuff, and rice and peas. But anyway, good stuff, good people, and straight up like most of the Jamaicans I grew up with, and that's how Dillion White is. The guy just wants to fight. He's willing to fight everybody. And Kamara, I think you're saying that Wilder's a bad matchup for Dillion because Dillion gets hit too often. But in almost every fight that Wilder competes in, he's losing the fight, and then he ends up, bailing himself out with a one-punch knockout. Now, is it possible that happens against Dillion White? Yes, but if Dillion White crowds Wilder the way he does in his fights and starts swinging on him and coming hard, Dillion White has a high-pressure style, and that would not be good for a guy like Deontay Wilder. In fact, he might break Deontay Wilder down, and he's got a sneaky, nasty left hook too. And Deontay Wilder's defense is not good, and that left hook can knock people out. I think people sleep on Dillion White. Dillion White has leveled up, I think, significantly since his loss to Anthony Joshua, where he rocked Anthony Joshua. Let's not forget that. He rocked Anthony Joshua. And then the other thing that Dillion White has a lot of guys don't have is he's not scared of anyone, and he's got a lot of confidence. So if I'm being honest, right now, if Dillion White were to fight Deontay Wilder, that's a 50-50 fight. And in fact, I would actually favor Dillion White because I think his boxing ability is better than Deontay Wilder's. I always go with the more technical guy. Deontay Wilder's only going to get away with landing that knockout punch for so long. Eventually, somebody is going to wisen up to that right hand, right? Somebody that's got some class. The only guys, if you think about it, that Wilder has fought that were good, really good, are Ortiz, who's 50 years old and didn't have the legs to finish him, and Tyson Fury, who came back off a 2-year coke and who knows what else binge. And I thought put it on Wilder. I thought Tyson Fury put it on Wilder. Even with the 2 knockdowns, I didn't think in any way, shape, or form Wilder won that fight. So I think Dillion White beats Wilder. Do I think Dillion White beats Tyson Fury? I think that's a more difficult fight for Dillion White because Fury's a really supreme boxer. But as far as going in there and gritting his teeth and grinding it out, I don't see too many people that can beat Dillion White. And in fact, I think Dillion White, if he gets a rematch with Anthony Joshua, could put him away too. People don't want to see Dillion White. I'm telling you guys, they just don't want to see the man. He's a real gangster in there, and he's high risk. He's sort of low reward now, but he's getting up there. He's starting to get paid. And look, they offered Wilder a bunch of money to fight Dillion White, and he didn't want it. And it's because it's too high risk. He'll fight a guy like Ortiz who's older and will gas out later in the fight. But Dillion White's not going to gas out. No, you're going to have to put Dillion White to sleep. And Dillion White proved that when he fought Anthony Joshua and he went out on his shield. He did not stop in that fight. So I have the utmost respect for Dillion White, and I think he might be my favorite boxer in the heavyweight division right now. I like him. I like Ruiz just because I thought it was cool that he was an underdog and he went in there and he did it, from Mexico. I thought that was pretty cool. And then I also really enjoy Wilder and Fury. But, man, White is a throwback. White is the most throwback out of all those guys. He'll just fight anybody, and I love the guy. Anyway, I've gone on and on about him. So Kamar Lewis said, I will purchase a shirt. Man, thank you so much, Kamar. Your support is greatly appreciated, and I think you'll love the shirts. They're pretty sick. People at the shows, when we throw them, they buy them like crazy. So thank you so much. Edgar Barbary, another great fighter. I love watching Edgar Barbary fight. Thanks for joining the chat, brother. Will Thurman's wide punches get him in trouble? I think that could definitely happen. You as well as anyone would know those straight punches are more technical or crisper, easier to throw, easier to land typically than those big wide punches. And you could land more in a shorter amount of time. So, yes, I got to go with the straight punches, beating Thurman's wide punches. That's not to say Thurman can't punch straight too. I mean, he's a good boxer. He has good power. He's pretty technical. He's a little awkward, but is he going to be able to deal with Pac-Man's speed and volume? He's never seen anything like that. Never. Marco Martinez. The real question is, when does Edgar Barbary get back in the ring for Fighters Rep? Check out his past fights on this channel. They're awesome. I agree, there's not too many heavyweights here in California that want to throw down on the unified kickboxing rules front. But if I can ever get Edgar Barbary in a fight, and he knows this, then it's happening. If it's up to me, Edgar Barbary fights all the time on every single Fighters Rep card. Excuse me. Kamar Lewis. Another thing, Dillion White gets tired in the later rounds. Trust me, you don't want Wilder touching you when you're tired. That's true. That's true. That's true. But Wilder gets really tired in the later rounds as well. And he's not even throwing that much. I don't have confidence in a guy who's fighting the elite heavyweights and doesn't have good boxing skills. It's worrisome for me. This is boxing, and I'm a boxing fan. And in order to win a boxing match, you need boxing skills. You can't just rely all the time on the one-punch knockout power. And I think throughout history, we've seen that guys that do that, eventually they get caught by the more technical guy, Eventually, Wilder already came across a guy in Tyson Fury who boxed his ears off. Even in the Szpilka fight, and Artur Szpilka at this point, I mean, who is he? He's not even – he's kind of gone downhill since that fight. He got knocked out in horrific fashion by Wilder. But let's be honest, he was outboxing Wilder. Luis Ortiz was outboxing Wilder. Everybody that fought Wilder was outboxing Wilder pretty much. until he got the knockout with with very few exceptions. Even Gerald Washington, who was relatively green at the time, and of course he got finished in the 5th round, but he was sort of outboxing Wilder up until the fight ended. So I know you don't want Wilder touching you, obviously, but I mean it's a right hand, and if Dillion White can put his hands up like he typically does and block the right hand, then he blocks the only weapon that Wilder has. I think the problem with the way Fury dealt with it, and the reason he got knocked down, is because Fury wants to slip everything. Fury doesn't want to block. He wants to slip everything. He wants to be slick all the time. I think if you deal with it in a more normal fashion, where you just put your headphones on and you slip once in a while, you're not gonna lose to a guy like Wilder. Of course, maybe being on the inside there, it's maybe from the outside looking in, it's easier said than done. Maybe he does hit so hard that even when you're blocking, you can't do anything about it. But I just think, he threw that same punch for 12 rounds against Fury. He landed it once in the final round. Even in the 9th round when he landed it and dropped Fury, it was more like a flash knockdown. It landed on the top of the head. But Fury was slipping. He was slipping. He wasn't blocking. And so I think if he would have blocked, put his hands up, absorbed the punch, maybe rolled with it, he would have been just fine. If he'd not been knocked down in that fight, he would have completely dominated that fight. So I can see what you're saying. He did get tired in the fight with Joseph Parker. But look, Joseph Parker is world class. Joseph Parker's world. He beat Andy Ruiz, who's the champ right now. So, and Dillion White went against Joseph Parker, who's been boxing his whole life. And Dillion White started late as hell. And Dillion White beat him. I mean, you got to give Dillion White his props, you guys. You guys got to give Dillion White his props, man. And this guy, let me tell you, he's got a mentality on him that you just don't see. He's down to fight whoever, whenever, wherever. I mean, he's like Fury and the gypsy culture, They're down to fight. They got a problem, they'll fight you. I feel like Dillion White is like that. And I got tremendous respect for Dillion White. So, as I said before, you guys, your donations below or purchasing of any Fighters Rep gear is much appreciated. The great majority of the proceeds will be invested right back, into the Fighters Rep promotion. And we've got Fighters Rep 7, one of the most exciting cards you're ever going to see in one of the best rule set. I think the best rule set in combat sports. It's going down July 27th. It'll be live right here on YouTube. If you're in Los Angeles or anywhere nearby in Seal Beach where the fight is happening, get your tickets at fightersrep.com. If you can't make it, tune in right here. We'll be live streaming it for free. And I'm talking about some of the best young talent in the world. And the Unified Rules Kickboxing rule set is the best rule set in combat sports. They stand and bang. If they clinch, the referee breaks them up right away, just like in boxing. It's basically a boxing match where you can also kick and throw knees. So for me, it's the most exciting rule set in combat sports. I call it stand and bang because that's what it is. The guys stand and bang until somebody goes down, and it's absolutely sick. So definitely tune in to check that out. So that's pretty much all I have for you guys today. Your support in the chat and everything else is greatly appreciated. I appreciate all your contributions, you guys. Who do you guys think will win this fight or these fights? Who do you guys think wins between Pacquiao and Thurman, between Caleb Plant and Mike Lee, between Derek Chisora and Arthur Szpilka, and most importantly for me, Dillian White and Oscar Rivas? Who do you guys have winning these fights? I'd love to know. Give me your opinion, and definitely click the subscribe button below. Join Knucklehead Nation. We do this every Thursday at 9. We preview the fights live, and we predict them live. And then immediately after the big fights on Saturday night, we're live again. So tune in right here immediately after the big fights. This is your forum to discuss the fights. The only non-biased, objective. We don't care where you're from. Forum. We don't care what you are. Forum. So definitely tune in, check us out, subscribe, and much love to all of you guys. Thank you so much for joining the stream. I'm out.